From the institution.
I call the Honourable Member Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, like a number of previous speakers, was not able to take a call in the first two readings of this bill. So it's a pleasure to take this. And I want to come and speak specifically to Section 5A. But before I do that, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to reflect on the bill and how I've gone about making my decision on this particular bill. When we're asked to exercise our conscience, there is no guidance in this Parliament as to how that conscience needs to be exercised. And so I did a number of things, Mr. Chairman. One was certainly to look to consult my own community. And as I went about consulting the ethnic communities in Auckland, their leaders, I certainly found a range of opinion, some supporting the direction of this bill as an element of 21st century society, and others, a sizable proportion of the ethnic community, not comfortable with the direction of this bill. And in fact, as you went further into that, you realised, or I realised, that they were not confident, they were not comfortable with the existence, the legality of gay relationships. And that is one matter that could not be relitigated. And there have been many who have consulted us and made submissions who would like to relitigate that primary principle. And that's not up for debate here. New Zealand crossed that bridge in the 80s. And so we're now talking about something else. Then I reflected with my family and friends, some very, very dear friends, who are members of the gay community, some highly respected New Zealand families who have children and grandchildren of gay relationships. And I looked upon them and talked to some of them and realised that here were people in gay relationships with children leading normal lives with no effect on anybody else, great citizens, great mums, great dads, bringing up children that anybody in this House would be very proud of. So that matter then became part of my conscience. The third element, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that I was a Human Rights Commissioner for New Zealand. And once you swear to uphold the human rights of New Zealand citizens, you don't do that for the period that you hold that mandate. You do it for all time. And so for me, in the end, it became a question of the rights of New Zealand citizens. And for me, then, it became very simple and very clear that our laws did not permit discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. And that, indeed, was enough for me to put all of the arguments together, all of the consultations that I had carried out together, to say there was only one position one could take on this particular bill, which was to support it. Because I'd also want to look into the eyes of those children, those mums and dads, and those friends of mine, and those leaders of our community who are members of this community, and to look them in the eye and say that when the time came to express their rights in this Parliament, and the only way I knew how, then I did the right thing. So from that point of view, it was the right thing to do, and I'm very pleased and proud to be able to support that. I know that members of my own community will not accept that. But I asked them to reflect on New Zealand's history. I asked them to reflect on where New Zealand's history, its presence and its future. And that's the country to which us as migrants have committed to. And we have to accept some of those things, particularly when a parliament such as this, the most democratic in the world, makes a decision. So for those points of view, Mr. Speaker, I was pleased. There was one final element, pleased to support this bill. There was one final element, Mr. Chairman, that influenced me, and it was this, that this bill takes nothing away from anybody. It actually takes nothing away. And those who argue that it does somehow reduce us as a society in terms of our spirituality certainly have a difficulty with me, because there's nothing about my relationship, my family, my marriage that is negated or diminished in any way. I know that marriage, the institution of marriage, has developed for a long time and no doubt will continue to develop. It is not set in a form that has always been the same. it has always developed. And a bit like our society and our civilization, this institution will also develop. Mr. Chairman, I want to come, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I do want to come to Clause 5A. I also had concerns about the role of ministers and the role of marriage celebrants. And there was a time when I thought that, hang on, this does impose, this does create some difficulties, and I wondered how the Select Committee was going to work its way through this. And I'm very pleased with what they've done in clarifying Section 5A, Section 29 of the Act itself. And I think it's a very, very elegant way in which they've gone about doing this, because they first underscore the principle that a marriage license shall authorize but not oblige any marriage celebrant. And I think that provides all of the protection that I require for a marriage celebrant that says, I'm not obliged to do this. And I can't imagine of any couple who would then want to use a marriage celebrant who express strong views. So for that reason, I accept the clarification. I also accept that the avoidance of doubt clause that has been written into the new Section 29 is also very powerful, because it does satisfy those with strong religious beliefs, and they are across a number of religions. They are protected, and so they should be. So that satisfied the two of the major requirements I had. Then I come to the SOPs. I have difficulty with all of the SOPs that comment on the role of marriage celebrants, because I think inadvertently those SOPs are now licensing discrimination itself. And so I don't believe we need to go beyond what is already in the amendments to this bill. Because to do anything else, we argue against the very principles that certainly have led me to the position I take. Because in the end, it will be discriminatory. And this is not the time or place for us to include provisions in our acts that are discriminatory for no other reason. It almost goes around in circles, because we're saying that because you want to discriminate, it's okay to discriminate, and yet the whole thing is about anti-discrimination. And if that's where we start from, then, Mr. Chairman, I believe that none of the SOPs I can in all conscience support, because to go beyond where this particular amendment goes would be unfair, would be illogical, and would be unnecessary. It does address concerns of our citizens, but I think we must shape responses to those concerns rather than accept them and make the amendments that they require, because the unintended consequences, as Moana Maki says, are too terrible to contemplate. There would be. And I could not look then the people I talked about earlier in the face to say that I supported that. So I will not be voting for those kinds of amendments. I do accept, however, the sincerity with which members have raised those in this particular House. And I know where it's coming from, and I know what lies behind it. But I take comfort from the fact that the religious freedoms that are necessary and protected in our legislation, Human Rights Act at the moment, are protected here as well. So, Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I want to thank those who have participated in this bill, the care with which they have made those comments, and I trust that those listening will accept that this is not a knee-jerk reaction. It's been a long process. It's a process that I've gone through personally, and in many, many discussions, arrived at a point that I now articulate. And I know that many will be disappointed. And I know that many, many more will not be disappointed. I want to be able to look at both those communities in the eye and say we have taken nothing away from anybody. We have in fact enabled us to be the kind of caring society we aspire to be. And if we create those who are inside and those who are outside, then I believe we have done that for too long already, and this is not the time or the place to do it, and I certainly will not want to be part of it. So with those comments, I will support the bill.
I call the honourable member Paul Goldsmith.
Mr. Chair,